Many players think that to level up their character from 1 to 50 in ESO, they should be doing the same thing over and over and over again. Just stop. Yes, I know grinding XP is the fastest, most efficient way to level up in ESO, and it's perfect for experienced players who already understand the game. But if you are new to ESO, then grinding experience is actually the complete opposite of what you should be doing to really build your character the right way. Instead, if you do the 7 things I'm about to show you in this video, you'll be so much better off in the long run. So let me break it all down for you. But first, let's talk about today's video sponsor who knows all about leveling up your web browser experience. That is Opera GX. So if you're tired of slow-moving, easily killed browsers, it's time to check out the dragon-slaying Opera GX experience, which can take you literally from 0 to hero in just seconds. Making the swap to GX is incredibly easy. Just use Opera GX's quick import tool to get equipped with all your previous browsing history, bookmarks, passwords, and cookies, dropping that lobby gear and getting upgraded to legendary quality. That is nice. GX is even compatible with Google Chrome extensions to make the transition easy. And Opera GX is the perfect solution for gamers who want their browser just as sharp as their blade. You can even enhance performance on your PC when gaming with your browser open. If you're checking out ESO builds on hacktheminotaur.com, for example, and get rid of all the lag. Just use the GX control panel to limit the CPU and RAM you want GX to use for optimal performance. Even with multiple tabs open as I was writing this guide, I saw a huge difference using Opera GX, which has made it so much easier to game and research builds at the same time. Opera GX lets you min-max your web browsing stats through endless customization, letting you create the perfect endgame browser for any playstyle. And with GX mods, you can flip your entire browser 180 degrees with just a few clicks and change pretty much anything you want, like changing your wallpaper and theme colors to something more dramatic, picking background music to set an epic mood, and even adding browser and keyboard sounds. Pick from hundreds of pre-made GX mods or create your own custom mods from scratch. The choice is yours. So upgrade your browsing experience with Opera GX today by clicking the link below to get started. And thanks again to Opera GX for sponsoring this video. So just to be clear, I'm not completely against grinding experience. I actually have my own videos where I explain how to do this effectively. But the thing is, I don't recommend this for brand new players for a few important reasons. Number one, it's just boring. I mean, it's mind-numbingly boring. Pulling the same enemies in the same spot for hours at a time is not my idea of a fun experience playing a game. Number two is it's expensive, and that's because you need good farming gear with the right sets and the right traits, which does actually require lots of crafting materials and of course crafting skill, which a new player would not have access to anyway. And number three, and possibly worst of all, it's that grinding experience leaves you missing tons of skill points by the time you hit level 50, which means you're pretty much guaranteed to struggle with ESO after level 50 because you're already behind the curve in terms of your progression. Most of the leveling guides I have found don't really mention any of the problems that I just talked about. So that's why I wanted to make this guide specifically for new players to showcase that there is actually a better path that's not only a lot more fun, but will also leave you better prepared for endgame content. Step number one is to complete the starting tutorial. Yes, I know, nobody reads the instructions anymore, but ESO's tutorial actually does a decent job in teaching some of the game's combat essentials like light attacks versus heavy attacks, interrupting enemies, and how to break free from crowd control. And no, it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and I actually recommend you watch a full beginner's guide on ESO like I have right here. You can check out this video later, just to round out your knowledge of the game itself, but the ESO tutorial is a decent place to start. And what I really like about ESO's tutorial, especially for brand new players, is the Hall of Starting Zones. This lets you browse literally every starting story quest and DLC in the game to get a little bit more information about what's available to play, which is nice to have all in one spot. And after completing the ESO tutorial, you'll be just at level 3, which brings us to our next step, which is choosing the right starting area. So once you complete the tutorial, I do recommend that you jump into one of ESO's 3 classic starting zones, rather than jumping into a full-blown chapter zone or DLC area right away. So if you didn't know, every zone in ESO is level scaled, or more accurately, your character is level scaled up, so that technically you can do content in any zone of the game. This is a great feature of ESO when it comes to like grouping up and meeting up with your friends, but this is actually a problem I think for beginners because certain zones are designed very differently. Story zones, like the new Necrom chapter and the Telvanni Peninsula, for example, are massive with widespread objectives that have you running all over the place for several minutes at a time before you can actually do anything. And on the way, you're likely to come across a world boss or world event that's going to kill you before you know what actually happened. Now, this is not a great starting experience for someone who is brand new to the game.
That was a waste of time.
Now contrast this with the game's 3 classic starting zones. These are Canarthi's Roost, Stros Mackay, and Bleak Rock Isle. And these are about 1/4 the size of a normal zone or story zone in ESO, which means you can run between objectives much more quickly while grabbing all the sky shards, the notable locations, finishing quests in just a few minutes. Also, there's no world bosses or world events here to kill you instantly, making these zones the easiest starting areas by far. So after completing the ESO tutorial, I definitely recommend completing one of these 3 starting zones right away. Now you can choose any of them that you prefer, regardless of your race or alliance, that does not matter. I personally like the Canarthi's Roost zone for its theme, but again, the choice is up to you. And if you do most of the content in one of these starter zones, that should take you from level 3 up to around level 6 or 7. Step 3 is to visit the main alliance zone for your faction. So for Aldmeri Dominion races of Khajiit, High Elf, and Wood Elf, this is the zone of Auradon. And for Daggerfall Covenant races of Breton, Orcs, and Redguards, your zone is Glanumbra. And finally for Ebonheart Pact, that's Dark Elf, Nord, and Argonian, your starting faction zone is Stonefalls. You can actually travel and explore any of these 3 alliance areas, but it's best to stick with your own specific faction for now because certain quest NPCs, which we'll talk about in a second, won't respond to you outside of your alliance areas. Now the goal as far as this first alliance zone goes is to cover all the basics. This means joining up with your NPC guilds. That's the Fighters Guild, the Mages Guild, and the Undaunted Guild to unlock those skill lines. You also want to check out the bank, maybe upgrade your bag space a little bit so you don't have to sell things as often, and also pick up the free starter house, which also gives you a free fast travel spot at any time. You really want to do all these basics first because it's going to make the rest of your leveling process much smoother. From there, I would just continue to explore the zone further, collecting sky shards and especially doing delves. Delves are huge because if it's your first time playing ESO, you'll get bonus experience for completing them, plus each delve has a sky shard to get you more skill points, and also delve bosses do drop set pieces which you can use to improve your character. Now along the way, if you spot any world events, I would try those as well. Usually other players are around to join in and help you, and you'll get even more experience from these. Also, world bosses and public dungeons are technically doable early on if you can get help from nearby players. I would recommend public dungeons especially, as these all have a group boss, which rewards a full skill point when it's defeated, and you don't really even technically need a group. These can be soloed pretty early on. So in total, if you do all the delves, the public dungeon, and any world events or world bosses you come across in that starting alliance zone, as well as maybe a few side quests or the main zone quest, you'll probably end up with another 4 to 5 levels easily, putting you over that level 10 milestone in no time at all, and you've just barely scratched the surface of what you can complete in ESO. In fact, there's a lot more options, which are going to allow you to level up even faster, which we'll talk about in just a minute. One other note here before we move on has to do with hitting that level 10 milestone. Now at level 10, your character does get access to Cyrodiil and PvP. Don't worry though, we're not going to actually do any PvP yet, but the introduction to Cyrodiil quest, which you can do at level 10, does give you a huge boost, because it's going to give you 2 Alliance War ranks, which equal 2 full skill points. And we'll be coming back to PvP in a little bit for another quick way to make more experience. Before leaving your starting Alliance zone, you may have noticed an NPC called the Hooded Figure lurking around town. Now, speaking to this character is actually how you start the classic ESO main story quest, and it's another fantastic way to level up your character, gaining tons of experience, useful items, and a lot of skill points in the process. To get started with the main story quest, all you're going to do is speak to the Hooded Figure, then find the benefactor located nearby in your main Alliance city, and you'll be transported to Cold Harbor to begin the main quest. Now way back when, this quest was actually the game's first tutorial, so you'll notice a few leftover tutorial elements, things like opening locked doors, finding sky shards, but the story is actually quite good as well. Here you'll be introduced to some of the major characters in ESO, including Lyris and the Prophet, and eventually others like Abner Tharn and Sai Sahan, who all play major roles in further ESO DLCs and chapters, So it's actually a really good idea to complete the main story at the start of the game, if only just to get that background information. Now what's nice about each main story quest is that, especially in the beginning, they're usually pretty short. They just take a few minutes to complete, and as I said, each quest rewards a lot of experience and a full skill point as well. So this is going to be a great way to not only fast track your progression, but also pad out your skills with important passives that you normally wouldn't have enough skill points to unlock otherwise if you're just grinding experience and doing nothing else. In other words, the main story quest for ESO, it's quick, it's easy, and it helps you build up your character, so it's definitely worth your time. After you've gotten your feet wet with your first Alliance zone plus some main story quests, you should be around level 15 or so. Now this is actually another huge milestone in ESO, because at level 15 your character now unlocks the ability to use a backup weapon and, more importantly, a whole new skill bar. At this point though, you probably won't even have enough skills to slot on both bars, so I don't worry about it too much. I just keep on progressing my character. And around this level, I like to start jumping into some bigger zones, and this includes chapter zones. Remember that room of starting zone stories we found back in the in-game tutorial? Well, unfortunately, you cannot go back there again to review all the game's story content, but you can fast travel to each of those story zones at any time using way shrines to get started. So if you purchase the Necrom chapter, for example, this would be a great time to teleport over to the Telvanni Peninsula and start diving into that zone story. So working on the story quest for any of these ESO chapters, that's going to give you at least another 5 levels or so, getting you past level 20, especially if you pick up side quests along the way, and more importantly, make sure to complete those delves, public dungeons, and any world events you come across in the same zone. Now that you have a few more levels under your belt, it's time to start getting into group content. This is where ESO starts to get a bit more challenging, so it is important to wait, in my opinion, until at least level 20, like we said. This is going to ensure that you have enough skills and skill points to actually bring something useful to your group. Remember too that in all ESO content, if your character is below level 50, your stats actually get scaled up to make you more powerful in all the content that you do, so there's really nothing to worry about here. It's extremely easy still. So to get started, just head over to your activity finder menu and select random group dungeon. This is a specific activity you can do once a day that rewards you massive experience. I mean, seriously, if you complete this while also using things like experience scrolls, maybe a few pieces of training gear, you can actually gain up to 2, even 3 levels at a time. As you can see here, you'll need to pick a role for group content. Typically, I recommend DPS or play as a healer. The reason for this is that, especially in normal content, these roles are the easiest and they require the least amount of knowledge of mechanics or how the dungeon works in order to do well. You just do as much damage or as much healing as you can, and you'll be absolutely fine. Now, more specifically for a DPS, you want to make sure to equip a good amount of damaging skills, including single target and AoE skills. AoE skills are going to be important for killing groups of enemies more quickly while you're clearing your way through the dungeon, and single target damage is important in some boss encounters to focus down the boss fast. Also, as a DPS, make sure to slot at least 1 heal and a defensive skill, something like an armor buff, to help with your own survivability, because, to be honest, sometimes random groups do get chaotic and you want to be able to take care of yourself if needed. And as I said, I also recommend queuing as a healer because in normal dungeons, especially at this level, the damage that you'll need to heal for your group is pretty minimal, so it's actually an easy job. Now, I do recommend using a restoration staff with the radiating regeneration skill. This is a heal over time that sticks to your group mates, and it will passively heal them back up to full health as you run through the dungeon. In combination with this, you should throw on whatever healing skills your class has access to. These will serve as burst heals or emergency heals, so once your teammate gets below 75% health or less, just hit one of those class heals and get them back to full health. Other than this, you can slot some damage skills to get through the dungeon faster. But like I said, with normal dungeons, especially at this level, it's extremely easy. So this will teach you a bit about the game, a bit about how to play your character. And like we said, completing the group activity, the activity finder, gives you a huge bonus to experience. This can give you multiple levels at a time, but also each dungeon itself, these actually have their own dungeon quest that once you complete it, that's going to give you even more experience plus another full skill point. So this is a win-win in my opinion. After you complete that random dungeon finder, you can go back into the dungeon finder and queue for any other dungeon you have not already completed the quest for. Now at this point, you won't get the random group experience bonus that's only once a day, but you will get more experience and more skill points from those dungeon quests, so this is another way to fast track that character progression, which I definitely recommend. Back at level 10, we briefly went to Cyrodiil to start the main PvP questline, but there is also a PvP Battlegrounds daily group activity too. This gives a huge experience boost, just like the random group Dungeon Finder, so even if you're not into PvP, I do recommend doing this at least a few times to try it out and get rewarded with, again, tons of experience. Simply queue up for the Battlegrounds via the group finder, and you can actually queue for both solo and groups here. I find it doesn't really matter below level 50, as you won't find much organized group activity here. So the cool thing about Battlegrounds, if you are new, is that most of them are objective-based games like Capture the Relic or Domination, where you don't even need to be good at PvP necessarily, you just need to follow the objectives and you have a good chance of winning. Plus, you don't even need to get first place to earn the massive XP bonus from the daily random. As long as you get second place or above, you still get the reward, so there's less chance of wasting your time. So this is yet another easy activity that you can do quickly for huge experience gains, so definitely check this one out as well. Alright, so we've done the zones, we've done the main story quest and chapters, and we've done group content like dungeons and battlegrounds. And by now you should have a really good grasp of what ESO is all about. You're learning your character and you're getting tons of skill points and loot in the process, plus hopefully having a really good time. And what I found is that you can get all the way up to level 40 or so really fast by using the methods I've listed in this video, but that sometimes those last few levels can slow down just a bit. So here's where I do actually recommend doing some focused grinding to finish out your character. Now this is going to be different from mindless XP grinding because we want to be really intentional about our character's skills and especially what we still need to unlock to improve our build. So let me give you an example. Here I am on my new Arcanist, which I'd like to turn into a tank build eventually, but my one hand and shield skill line is still pretty low. I definitely don't want this skill line to still look like this when I hit level 50. Now to improve, I can equip all of my sword and shield skills on the same skill bar where I'm going to be earning experience and essentially quadruple my progression for this skill line. The best way I've found to do this is by focusing on really easy content, things like dolmens, where I don't need to contribute that much and I can just stay on one skill bar in order to max out those skills as fast as possible. But hopefully all of this helps you when it comes to leveling up in the Elder Scrolls Online in a way that's fun and makes sense. If you found the video helpful today, then definitely check out all of the other guides and builds we have on the channel. And don't forget to crush that like button so that YouTube knows to share this video with others. But as always, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you're doing well. Stay safe out there and I will see you around in the next video. Hey everybody, if you're struggling at all with the Elder Scrolls Online, I definitely know the feeling. I struggled with this game for months. The biggest problem I had was even though the game says you can play any way you want, it never really teaches you how. Like I said, it took me many months of teaching myself how the game works before I could actually start to make builds that were truly effective and fun to play. Well, today I'm excited to let you know that I finally put down my system for creating builds into a simple step-by-step guide that you can now learn and use to create your own fun and powerful builds yourself. We're calling this the ESO Zero to Hero Academy, and it's being hosted through Podia, which is an amazing online learning platform. So far, our ultimate build guide has over 25 lessons and over 2 hours of content designed to take you from a beginner to a master theory crafter, not in years like it took me, but in just a few hours. So if you want to check out the guide and preview all of the included lessons, just click on the link below to learn more.